Now, this morning is a big deal. We are continuing in the theme of a series called Responding to a Fractured World, Rethink, React, Recreate. And we have with us today the Reverend Bonnie Tarwater. Bonnie is living a living response to a fractured world, living both in herself and in her work. She's a Christian Unitarian Universalist minister. She's been ordained both in the UU Church and the UCC. And she, after many years of parish ministry, she decided that she really was moved to create something that would be closer to the earth and closer to the heartaches and heart throbs of living. So she has created the Church of Our Common Home in Oregon, where she and her husband live. And the church offers worship and programs that people zoom into from all over the world. And people who are local attend regularly. They meet in a barn, and she'll tell us much more about that today. Reverend Bonnie is an artist, musician, social justice activist, dream worker, and writer. So you're going to see something of her multiple talents today. She also works with her husband, and both of them offer counseling through Our Common Home Counseling Center. You can see from her credits on the screen that she has done work in art, theater, and theology. So she has a vast background. One of her most recent articles is she presented at Harvard in a conference, and the title of it is Art Ministry as Prayer at Church for Our Common Home. She also worked closely with John Cobb in his book Confessions, and she wrote the final chapter for that. She also was a collaborator with John Cobb, in fact, a huge influence on him in terms of the importance of small groups for healing the earth. So, Bonnie, we can't wait to hear what you have to share. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much. Mary Elizabeth Moore, it's just an honor to be with you. And as I've shared, I have such high respect and love for you, even though I barely know you, because so many people I know have studied with you and love you so much. So I thank you. And it's wonderful to be with people that I know here and people that I don't know. So let's just begin by calling the spirit of John Cobb to be with us, because I really feel his presence on the other side. And we come today in his name, John Cobb. So yeah, I think my husband is here. I'd like to introduce him. Walt Rutherford is my better half, and he is the director of our counseling center, and he came knowing much more about farming and gardening than I did. So we are, I would say I'm a city kid learning how to plant and take care of animals and relate to the natural world in a beautiful place for the first time. And it's been a wonderful adventure that we've been on together here. We've been here for 5 years. So let's see. I think I'll start by sharing that John Cobb and I had an unusual relationship, and you all remember he had asked Dr. Cobb on the Center for Process Studies website, because he had retired before I went to seminary, and I never took a class even in process theology. So when I actually was called to serve a new church start with the United Church of Christ in San Diego, this is many years ago, I just went to that website and I asked Dr. Cobb a question. And I said, Dr. Cobb, will you be on our advisory committee, and will you help me? I'm starting this new church. And he wrote back, you know, how John was, how generous he was, and how he just was It's like he was just sitting there all the time waiting to support and love and help all of us, right? And so right away, I got an email. And I think I had sent a website of some of the artwork I'd done or something like that. And so he wrote back right away, yes, of course I will. And you're just the kind of minister we should be supporting. So I experienced that kind of support from John, as most of us did, for a long time. And it just has meant the world to me. And then, I remember I went to Wikipedia to look up process theology. Okay, so, and then I had an opportunity, of course, to study with him for many years. And I was an unusual person sort of in his posse because my background is in the arts and I am not a PhD. And so we became friends. And then I remember I asked him at one point if he could recommend a spiritual director, because he was at Pilgrim Place and I was in San Diego. And my spiritual director, I have to begin too. I did not grow up in the church. And when I went to seminary, I went not because I was, like interested in becoming a minister, but because I was desperate to find some kind of solace and comfort and meaning in the personal conflict and difficulty I was having at that time in my life. And boy, did I, as I say, get my money's worth. I'm telling you, I knew that, about the story of Christmas and Easter, but I had no idea what Jesus taught. And the ideas of his teachings of forgiveness, love of enemies, praying for persecutors, the whole concept of God, the whole concept of prayer. This has completely changed my life. So I'm so grateful to Claremont School of Theology and all of my teachers there. And so I'd never heard of a spiritual director, and it was some beautiful soul. I remember offered money to people on a parish ministry track, which I eventually got on, and to have a spiritual director. So I had a spiritual director in Claremont, and she was a wonderful woman, and it was such a deep and beautiful relationship. And then she got very sick and could no longer see me. So that's why I asked John if he knew a spiritual director at Claremont. And he said, well, if you just want somebody to come talk to sometimes, you can come and talk to me. Again, just so loving and generous. Speaking, Natalie, of Jesus' teachings, loving people, John taught us that because he loved us. And I used to always say John Cobb was the best ambassador for Christianity of anybody I ever knew. That's, I think, probably true of most of us. Yeah. So I did. I was very grateful. I would go and visit him regularly, and we'd talk about God. What a wonderful thing. And what a great teacher he was. I would ask him these hard questions like, the word made flesh. I don't understand. What does that mean? And he would just always give me these pithy, simple explanations for things that even I could understand. And so I'm so grateful to him. Well, then he wanted to go to North Korea. And he asked me if I would, and I, of course, when I would visit with him, I got to know his wife, Jean. And then he asked me if I would take care of Jean when he went to North Korea. So that was wonderful. I got to stay at Pilgrim Place, and some of you who are my friends were there, and it was an honor to do that for John, the least I could do. And what a wonderful thing that he just went to North Korea. It was always, showing us what it meant to reach out to our enemies and to pray for our persecutors. So, and then I went and served a church in Michigan, and he was my spiritual advisor, and it was a very difficult church situation. And when I came back from Michigan, I was severely depressed. I had been serving as a parish minister for a long time and felt very, I was, of course, like most of us, was the first woman to serve in the churches that I served. And, it was incredibly politically complex. And I was just burnt out. But I was on fire, I'm like an obnoxious convert. I was on fire to preach the gospel, to, preach the good news, to share the teachings of Jesus. And, it became apparent that UCC, and they were welcoming to me, was a much better community than Unitarian Universalism, where I started. And, but even in UCC churches, people would say to me, I've never heard anybody talk so much about Jesus as you do. So I was a naive and evangelical convert, and still am. So when I came back from this church it was a big, beautiful UCC church. I remember, I just couldn't believe that I would ever get a church that looked on the outside so good. It was beautiful and big and a university town. And it was just really a painful experience. And when I got back to San Diego, I was severely depressed. And John was, of course, as always, stood ready to be supportive. And he just said, "Oh, well, you have to come and lead this tract, the Anima Mundi tract, for Seizing an Alternative Conference." And what a beautiful gift, to sort of put me to work when I was so very depressed. So I did. I worked on that conference, and I sort of attribute that conference, and my husband did also. We together were honored to be a part of that, as many of you, I think, attended and were a part of it. And then I got really inspired. I realized in that conference that I had always known, I had, was well informed and well educated about the earth crisis, learning a lot from John Cobb. And but I never really it really never got to my bone marrow until Seizing an Alternative. And Vandana Shiva and Bill McKibben, and it was really a powerful experience for me. So at that point, Walt, my beloved husband, who's been so supportive, and watched me in so many of these churches really struggle, because so many churches, of course, said, "Oh, you're the perfect minister for us. This is what we want. We want somebody who's creative and can bring the arts, and who loves children and families." And as soon as I would do that, I was like, "Oh, well, this isn't exactly what we wanted," because of course people fear change. So thank you, Walt, for all of your support. And then it just became apparent. It was, let's just try to have our, a house church, a home church. And we just started having Sunday worships, the two of us, in our living room in San Diego. And from there, John came to visit once, and he said, and of course, because of Southern California, we would worship in the backyard. And so he would say, "Yes, I really enjoy your backyard church." So we became sort of a backyard church. And then, others came, and we always had a meal, a potluck after. And then, this whole notion, our first name was the Church of Mary Magdalene. And then it just became apparent in that year, 2015, it was both the year of John Cobb Seizing an Alternative Conference. And I don't think it's an accident. It was also the same year that Pope Francis published the environmental encyclical Laudato Si. So I made a commitment to both of them in that I would do everything I could to care for Mother Earth. And we changed the name then. I was so really touched by Laudato Si and his expression, Pope Francis's, of caring for our common home. So we changed our name to Church for Our Common Home. And that was, I guess, I can't believe it's been a long time now, Walt. We're still going. And let's see. So John Cobb then invited me to write a chapter in a book. It was never published, but it was a book that he wanted to write about ecological civilization. And he asked me to write something about mothers and babies. And so I was very honored. I've never been a much of a writer, so I was always very insecure about it. But he would always encourage me that we need different kinds of writers with different kinds of voices, because, of course, this is the good news of the gospel, and it's also intellectually what he was committed to. So, uh, um, in doing that, I began studying Rudolf Steiner, and that really has been a huge influence to me. And then a friend of mine, Dan McKenna, who was the Ralph Waldo Emerson Chair at Harvard Divinity School, invited me to a conference at a Camp Hill community and biodynamic farm on intentional community. And I think that was in, I don't know, it was a few years later. But that conference really also changed my life. I remember I called Walt and said, "I'm sorry, Walt, I can never come home because this is the most loving place I've ever been." So it was a wonderful experience. And that began my study of biodynamic farming, of Camp Hill communities, of Waldorf schools, and Rudolf Steiner. And then I noticed I've studied gematria, which is, I don't know if any of you know about, which is so interesting to me that Alfred North Whitehead was a mathematician. I can barely balance my checkbook. And gematria is the study of numbers in the Bible, the symbols of numbers. And at any rate, both Alfred North Whitehead and Rudolf Steiner were born in 1861. And I think that's significant. I don't know exactly why. But at some point, I was very honored to be invited to go to China with John Cobb. Dr. Wang invited me. He said, "You can go." I think they were very concerned because John Cobb had just had a stroke. And because I was, sort of a friend of his, and that he needed a companion to sort of watch over his health. And so I was honored to go, and they invited me to give presentations at these universities, and the whole experience with John in China was just extraordinary. And I gave a presentation there about. Jaha didn't want me to talk about the Christian church, but to talk about our counseling center and Camp Hill communities and biodynamic farming. So during this time, Walt and I knew I didn't want to serve traditional churches anymore. And our counseling center and our house church were sort of humming along in a small way. And just on a lark, we thought we'd like to maybe start doing some biodynamic farming. And just on a lark, I took a flight up to, we started looking if we could, it was so expensive, as you know, in Southern California, we couldn't really afford to live there. So we're thinking about how we could maybe, invite someone who had land to, let us grow some vegetables and fruits there. We were thinking all sorts of different ideas of how we could create a ministry. And then I had served a church here in Oregon, the First Congregational Church of Lincoln City, here on the coast a number of years ago. So because we had some friends here, and I knew that this is Willamette Valley is a beautiful farming area, I came up here on a lark just to check it out because I had free Southwest miles. And wow, it's really evident. It was just all kinds of forces came together. I met several biodynamic farming farmers, and this is kind of a biodynamic mecca in the Willamette Valley. And of course, there's a lot of vineyards here. And I think the French had something to do with that because, of course, the French know that if you love your grapes, the wine tastes better. So I started looking, and we could buy a small farm here in the Willamette Valley was cheaper than a studio apartment in San Diego. So we decided, even though my grown children and grandchildren were in San Diego, that we would come up here to try to create a place for our ministry and learn about biodynamic farming, and that this would be good for our family, that our grandchildren really needed a beautiful garden sanctuary to learn more and to interact more with the natural world. So we really felt guided in so many ways. And we came here and we moved into our pink house. It was painted pink. And on 5 acres, just a beautiful place. And we moved in one day before the COVID lockdown. So for 2 years, we were here in a new, beautiful place, getting to know the trees and the flowers and the grass. And at that time, I just got inspired to create a kind of interfaith prayer garden on 12 trees. So we have 12, we call it the Interfaith Secret Prayer Garden. We have 12 altars on 12 trees, honoring many world religions. And that practice is something that Rudolf Steiner had taught me about, his suggestion of sitting with a tree. And I began this in San Diego, and it had been really a powerful experience. Just every day for 20 to 30 minutes, and just talking to the tree, getting to know the tree. And I felt so close to the tree in San Diego. I was just shocked. And this was on a busy road. So I continued that here. And so we have a beautiful prayer garden. And then the biodynamic farming community has been extremely welcoming to me, and I'm on their board, and I've learned so much from the biodynamic farming farmers here. And we then are just beginning to come out into the community after COVID lockdown. And then, of course, the Zoom dimension of our church was, like most of us, became much more accentuated because the people that we had been with worshiping in San Diego wanted to continue on Zoom. So we have been doing Zoom church and programs and counseling ever since. Like so many of us, it was COVID that really invited this new experience of staying connected to people, even though we are non-locally. So yeah, so that's been going on, and we are, as we've gotten to know people, we're right, if any of you know Oregon, we're right in between Corvallis and Salem, the capital of Oregon. And so that's been a blessing because we kind of have a foot in each of those communities. And then John was writing his book, Confessions, and I was so honored. He invited me to write a chapter, Can Women Save Christian Discipleship? So what am I going to say? No, John, we can't. So I just I said yes. And so in thinking about that, we had conversations about the loneliness in the modern world and the need for people to have safe places where they can talk about the severity of our earth crisis and develop closer, loving relationships. And Walt, as a brilliant counselor and psychologist for many years, has taught me, and our marriage, has taught me, and that, love is really the most important spiritual practice for any of us. And that is the teachings of Jesus, as you said, Natalie. And and Walt and I know, as people who've led groups, and that creating safe, facilitated conversation is not rocket science. There's just a very few kinds of guidelines that make it safe. And so we kind of wrote those up, and we have been loving these Earth Crisis support groups and potluck parties, we call them. I think we need a new name. I don't know. It's kind of long and winded, but we've been having them here locally, here in Dallas, which is this small town near Salem and Corvallis. And that's been a very meaningful experience. And we invite you, if you ever want to come. We offer Zoom Earth Crisis support group and potlucks parties to people on request, if you'd like to see how those work. And part of what we do is invite people to share, how are you feeling and thinking about, all the crises, because it's not one. We have ecological crisis and the threat of nuclear war, now we have, this horrific dictatorship and lack of democracy here in our country. And, there's social, economic, political, environmental. There's so many problems, and they're all interconnected. And so that's been a wonderful experience. And as we've gotten started, sometimes Walt and I have just been the two of us. And those have been great meetings. And both of us are 12-steppers, meaning, we have really benefited from, I grew up in an alcoholic family. So Al-Anon, adult children of alcoholics, and then going to AA meetings with, beloved friends and family members who are in AA has been high church. I remember, by the way, I razzed John Cobb once. Hey, John, there you are, a fancy theologian and everything, and you've never been to a 12-step program. And I think of 12-step programs as one of the highest, most loving churches on the planet, because, of course, Bill Wilson was studying in an Oxford group and studying the New Testament and praying. And so much of the 12 steps is, I experience them as just very straightforward teachings of Jesus 101. So in these Earth Crisis support groups, we are also inviting people to action, because it's so easy for all of us to get isolated and depressed with all of the world problems. So, and I'm happy to say this has actually worked. One of the projects that came out of our Earth Crisis support group now was Interfaith Prayer and Song Vigil for Peace that we started in Corvallis with some people who are coming from Corvallis. And we've been meeting for over a year and singing and praying in support of the Oregon State University student group that has a free Gaza protest every Saturday, 12 to 1 in front of the courthouse. So we are there. I can't believe I do this. I bring my guitar and I sing on a street corner every Saturday, 12 to 1. And that's been a very wonderful way to get out and be with others, to meet people. And we need this now. I think we see this. It's so exciting to me that even though there's terrible problems, that there's just this wonderful spirit of people coming out into the streets and being together in different kinds of marches and protests. And so that's been deeply meaningful. And then also, a wonderful way to get to know people in your community. And out of those conversations and relationships, other projects and other kinds of ideas come as well. Now Walt and I are so happy to be going every Monday to Moral Mondays with the Poor People's Campaign here in our capital of Oregon, Salem, Oregon. And we're so blessed. We live in the country. We have this beautiful place. We are able to do a lot of work on Zoom or phone and internet, and we're able to be a part of these other communities that aren't too far away. So please, if you haven't found a Moral Monday gathering, check it out. Reverend Barber is a profound religious leader of our time, and we are so happy again to be singing on the streets of this in front of the Salem Capitol every Monday with Moral Mondays and the Poor People's Campaign with Reverend Barber. So I could go on and on. I'd like to just open it up for conversation. I'll just close first by saying, because my background is in the arts, I worked in the theater. I was a drama teacher. I was a theater director, and I've taught visual arts also, and I've done a lot of visual arts. Oh, by the way, I should just say, our barn became we just sort of moved from the living room, and instead of being a house church, we became a barn church, a manger church, and people just started bringing us animals. So we have goats and ducks and chickens and rabbits that all have been just gifted to us. And so worshiping with the animals has been a beautiful experience. And we also now are sometimes worshiping in the rose garden because it's very beautiful. Just to be outside and to invite the natural world in and to go out into the natural world. And these are practices that we need so desperately in order to move the Titanic of, institutional religion away from, just people and God, but take it to spirit and the natural world and the human family. So we've really been it's been a wonderful experience exploring those relationships and exploring those prayer practices and worship and ritual with the natural world, in the natural world. And our sort of tagline is come love and be loved by the natural world. So as Job said, talk to the animals, they will teach you. We have learned so much from the natural world here and from our beloved family, which is our, who knew, that ghosts were like dogs and they follow you around and they love you unconditionally like dogs do. So we have that, and before we just open it up, I'd love to just hear from you. We are renaming. We named our biodynamic farm. John Cobb came almost every Sunday to our barn worship 4 to 5 before his dinner time at Pilgrim Place, and that just meant the world to all of us in our small church to have his dedication to our ministry and to Church for a Common Home. So one Earth Day, we don't have a lot of money. We decided, what could we give him? And we decided that we would give him naming our farm after him. So we've named it the John Cobb Echo Farm. And, his humility is galactic. And he used to say, oh, no, I think you should only name things after people's names after they've died. So now that he's on the other side, we call upon him and feel his spirit here. And then in the theologic commitment to partnership, which John really celebrated in that we live in an amazing time of having all these new Gnostic gospels, having more women in religious leadership, and so this model of Jesus and Mary Magdalene has been very important to me and to our church. And the divine feminine, the lost bride, those who have been left out. Of course, Mary Magdalene was, very close to Jesus, and many of us believe with scholarship that they were probably married, and that Mary Magdalene was the one who brought the gospel good news from Alexandria, Egypt, to the south of France. And there were Catholic communities and many communities in that area that have many myths and stories about Mary Magdalene as a teacher there. And there's a newly published gospel called The Beloved Companion, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which was just published in 2010. And the editor and translator says that this is a gospel that has been in hiding in her community for almost 2,000 years. So whether that's true or not, I think I believe it actually. Whether it's true or not, this has revitalized our religious imagination, which is exactly what we need. The teachings of Jesus need to be revitalized. And they are so filled with the Spirit. They call us to infuse it with Spirit. Now, and the people who wrote the original Gospels, they had no problem recycling and retelling stories. And I really believe that we are called to do the same. This is a wonderful Gospel that does not use the word God or Father God very often. It uses the word Spirit. And I really recommend it. And we're going to be studying this for the next 2 months in our church, so you're welcome to join us anytime. and on Zoom if you're not here in person. And we've decided that for Mary Magdalene's feast day, which is July 22nd, we'll celebrate it the Sunday before on July 20th, Sunday. That afternoon, we're going to have a renaming of our retreat center and a blessing. And we're going to rename, we've been calling it the John Cobb Echo Farm and Retreat Center. We're now going to name it the John Cobb Echo Farm and Mary Magdalene Retreat Center with this theology of partnership of the divine feminine, the divine masculine. So the invitation is, we had a wonderful woman who's given us this beautiful tiny house. So we have a guest house, and now we have a new tiny house, and we have bedrooms here, and we have 5 acres to explore. We have an art studio in the barn. We have lots of programs, Bible study and a centering prayer group on Tuesdays, a dream group on Thursdays. And so we invite people to come here. All of you are invited, and for short stays or longer stays. I should say also, we've become a WOOF host community, which is the worldwide, the World Opportunities for Organic Farming. It's a wonderful program, and people come from all over the world. We've had people from Canada, Rwanda, all over the United States. We have someone coming next week who grew up in Kenya, and it's a wonderful international program where people can go and learn about organic farming for a weekend, a week, a month, or more. And we need the help. There's a lot of work here. We're growing a lot of food and taking care of a lot of animals. And they come, and that has been a shot in the arm to have many of them young, some of them not so young, but having people come here and help us do the work that's here. All of them, by the way, have loved Earth Crisis support groups and potluck parties. So that's been a real affirmation to the effectiveness and the need for them. So I invite you specifically anytime, but to our Mary Magdalene, the renaming and blessing of the Mary Magdalene Retreat Center. And the invitation is also to do some artwork. There's this beautiful guided meditation of your own, the great tree within, Mary Magdalene calls it. And it's a vision and a kind of guided meditation where you imagine you are a tree planted in the earth with boughs reaching towards the galaxies. It's a beautiful meditation. And we are inviting people to make artwork of themselves as the great tree of life, the great tree of wisdom. And already we have had people send something. People just sent me this that they made on the computer. And we have, so we invite you, please, everybody can draw or paint or color a tree, and then we will hang them in our outdoor exhibit on the tiny house and make a forest of trees. And we studied Suzanne Simard's really brilliant book, Finding the Mother Tree, and learned a lot. She's an a forest ecologist, and it's a beautiful story of her personal raising of consciousness with her understanding of the incredible relationship of trees underground, overground, and in the galaxies. So please join us. Come, please get on our mailing list and make some tree artwork, and you can take a photograph of it and text it to me or email it to me, and we will hang it as a part of the forest. And we are surrounded by an incredible forest here. And it feels like a fairy tale enchanted forest. It really does. We live down a dirt road, and it just could not be more beautiful. So I just want to invite you all to come in person, come to any of our programs, and let's just open it up. I'm really sorry my PowerPoint is not working. It's one picture tells 1,000 words. I'm sorry, but why don't we just open it up? Mary Elizabeth, anybody has anything you'd like to talk about?
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Bonnie. You, one picture may be worth 1,000 words, but one person's story is worth 1,000 lights. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's